Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 45th edition of the Glacier Book Club. My name is Doug Mitchell, and I have the extreme pleasure of sitting next to my pal and a great author, John Fraley. This will not be for many of you the first time that you have spent time with John. He was the very first Glacier Book Club participant when I came up with this cockamamie idea when we were all living in our basements in March and April. I called John and said, "Hey, what if we did a book club and we had people read your book, and then you came in and I watched that today. It was very fun. I watched that episode today. Believe it or not, in May of 2020, we actually did it in person. No, not knowing what we didn't know at that point. We were in different rooms. We were socially distanced, but it was great. So tonight we have a chance to be with John again. Thanks to all of you again who have made this such an important part of my life and our life at the Conservancy. And John, we couldn't do it without you and the other authors who have been given so generously of their time. So thanks for joining us again tonight.
You bet, Doug. And one thing I wanted to mention, I asked you if it was okay to praise you occasionally. And one of the things I've come right up with very quickly is that Doug Mitchell gives you your money's worth as an NGO executive director. Let me tell you, he does.
Well, I love my work, as you know, and it's really been a privilege to do it for these. It's my 10th year, believe it or not. I started when I was 57. I'm going to turn 66 this year, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. The book, of course, is Heroes of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. There are many. One of the questions we might get to is, you had 13, who was 14? Maybe we can talk about that. We want to talk a little bit about the idea of wilderness in general. And when you read the book, you identified that there's a landing strip, and then there's a cabin and another cabin, and how does that work together? And then the history of Bob Marshall dying young, as did George Melendez Wright, and then Bob Cooney, whose story you tell, who was contemporaneous and may actually have run across those people at some point in his life. So lots to go over. But I thought one of the things I wanted to do, here's an admission. I know you'll think less of me, but that's okay. I have never set foot in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. I know, Ed Wilson. It's not right. And so as a result, sometimes in the book, I found myself not getting context. So I asked John if he would share some of his personal photographs with us and kind of give us a guided tour for 5 minutes or so of the Bob Marshall Wilderness that he knows and loves. So we're going to start with kind of a map, and you can see the Bob Marshall Wilderness kind of in that glacier complex next to the Great Bear Wilderness. Yep. And I can use I can actually use my thing. Is that working, Andrew? No, you've got it. Andrew's got it. Okay. And it's about 1 million acres. Is that right?
Well, the Bob Marshall proper is right around 1 million, but along with the complex, it's about 1.5 to 6 million.
Yeah, and for context, Glacier Park is about 1 million, and that makes the Bob Marshall Wilderness bigger than the state of Rhode Island, just for context. Yeah. And then I think we have another map, maybe a closer up map.
No, we don't have.
Okay, great. So we're going to go then to some photographs that you gave us.
Well, this is a classic going along the base of the Chinese Wall. This came from the Murphy family, who were the first outfitters really in the Bob. This gentleman here, can you see who I'm talking about? Or
yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yep.
That's Jerome Murphy, and he's still alive. He's way into his 90s. Is still alive.
And you said this is 41, something like that?
Something like that. And so that's, I'm pretty sure that tentatively. But they have a museum in Ovando if you ever want to go look and see what the Murphys have. But this is a good initial view of why people were so captured by the Chinese Wall.
Right, and the Chinese Wall, of course, is this edifice behind, and you talk about accessing the Chinese Wall through like Montour Creek, I think is one of the access points.
Places, yeah. Most people go through Benchmark.
Okay, and so for people who aren't familiar with the geography, give us an idea of, so Montour Creek, which I drive by every time I go to Helena. right, is, near, Clearwater / Ovando, right? And then where's Benchmark?
Well, Benchmark, if we take it from the west side, Benchmark is, a lot of people probably know where Holland Lake is and that west entrance to
So in the Sealy Swamp.
Yeah, and you go over any of those passes, and then the Chinese Wall is, it just goes north to south right in front of you. So you access it that way, and we'll talk more about it probably.
Great, great.
So if we can get the slide. So this is the Chinese Wall, and you can see runs north and south. If you haven't seen the Chinese Wall, it would really be a great goal for you to look at, to get in there and see it. There's one problem though. What's the problem?
It takes a while to get there. It's more than a one-day hike.
It's the most, and I was just reading again today to make sure I was right, but there's not far away from here is the most remote spot in the Bob Marshall Wilderness or in Montana. And it's about 18 miles as the crow flies, any other place where you can reach, and 25 miles by trail. So it's one of the most remote spots in Montana, if not the most remote. So that's kind of neat. This is the marvelous White River. And the White River, you can see this is the west side of the Chinese Wall over here that wraps around. But the White River, you notice how chalky it is? It looks like, oh boy, I bet there aren't any fish in there. Well, when I did my first surveys in there in 1980, it's loaded with fish. And anywhere you find like any kind of a rock formation or down timber, they'll be there. And they're a big cutthroat too. So that's the White River. Everybody that goes in the Bob up there always seems to end up at the White River. And I don't know how many of your attendees have been to the White River, but I'll bet some of them have. Yep. This is the two main trout species in the Upper South Fork is the bull trout, this is the bull trout, and then the West Slope cutthroat, which we'll see in a minute. And you can see that the bull trout has no spots on its dorsal fin, and that's how you know that it's a bull trout and not a non-native trout.
No black, put it back.
No black, put it back. Well, you must have come to like our angler ed classes.
Everything you say, I just go straight to memory.
Yeah. Okay. This is the West Slope cutthroat. This is my favorite fish. I spent a long time studying West Slope cutthroat in the Bob. And how do you know that this is for sure a pure West Slope cutthroat? Because it is. So tell me how you would know that.
I wouldn't know the purity, but I would be looking for a red slash in the jawline. But I'm curious about whether I think some cut bows also might have that.
Possibly, but in the Bob, there's no, especially on the west side, there's no record of hybridization. Gotcha. That was what my 12-year-old or 14-year-old study showed. You were too smart. I was trying to catch you if you look here on this fin, there's a little bit of a clip here.
Right under your thumbnail.
Yeah, so this is actually a genetically tested, and we know that it's pure.
Gotcha.
So this is, that's kind of neat. You can look at a trout and it's pure.
Which is kind of a big deal. And with your help as donors, we have helped reintroduce the native West Slope cutthroat into the park, which has been complicated by what I will call bucket biology, where people bring in rainbow trout or lake trout, and it causes this hybridization that diminishes the genetic purity. So we've invested heavily with the park in that program.
And like the project they were doing at the Arrow Lake area when they removed those, and they were going to do the same thing in Hidden Lake, which everybody probably knows because that's Yellowstone cutthroat. But I don't think they've completed that one yet because there was too much opposition to it. But I don't know. But that's what they're doing. They're trying to return it all to West Slope cutthroat because they were the native ones, even on the east side there a little bit.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And as we go to the next photograph, I want to remind folks, this is your book club. I know that we'll get it started a little bit, but please put questions in the chat, and the amazing Amy Lucky will be curating questions. So please put stuff in the chat, and we're going to get to a lot of questions tonight with our guest John Fraley. And here's a picture of old Bob.
Right, and I just threw it in to get our conversation. Eventually, you and I talked about the intellectuals and the cowboys. It takes both to make a wilderness. And Bob was the ultimate intellectual. He had Harvard degree when he was 27, 28 years old, and then went on and got a PhD at Johns Hopkins and so on. And yet some of his contemporaries that helped the wilderness also were Joe Murphy, who didn't have anything past 8th grade, and several others. So it's you need both. You need the intellectual and the scientific oversight, but you also need the average person to support wilderness.
And he could hike, man.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he would just put in like 20-mile days without any hesitation. There's stories of, hiking, through long sections in the Bob.
Well, the book that I put out right before this Heroes book, and it mentions it in there too. He went on a 5-day hike through the Bob Marshall in 182 miles in 5 days. So he was running 30, 40 most of the time. And then also in the missions, he also did the same thing. When he came out from the Bob, he went right into the missions, did the same thing, and walked to the Sioux Lake post office.
Yeah, just like Mike Reiner and Dave Baylor, pretty much the same. I think personally he looks like Forrest Gump. So instead of run, Forrest, run, this is hike, Bob, hike. I think might be appropriate.
Okay, does anybody want to try to guess what that one is? Can we ask them or not?
Yeah, we can.
Does anybody know what that is? Anybody out in the audience know?
Stanton Lake?
Big Salmon Lake. Clifford Kipp.
Clifford Kipp, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're in the presence of royalty. My friend Clifford Kipp, is the executive director of the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation. Part of the proceeds of this book go to the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation. They're an amazing nonprofit that does incredible work protecting the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And if you don't know about them, you need to know about them. If you don't support them, I encourage you to think about supporting them. And Cliff's an incredibly inspirational leader for really an incredible group. So Cliff, thanks for joining us tonight.
Let's test him a little bit. What's the name of this peak, Clifford?
I don't know the answer to that.
That's Charlotte Peak.
Okay. Still learning. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that nod, Doug. Good to see you, John, and happy to be here.
I couldn't quite hear that.
That's we're gonna adjust I think that's us. That's an us thing, not a you thing, Cliff.
Oh, okay.
Got it. Okay. I did not know that.
It's a really prominent site in there. Okay, it's just another view of Big Salmon Lake. Most of the people that, let's say a Joe Murphy in the 20s or 30s, would take dudes in there from all over the world, and they all loved Big Salmon Lake, and they all swore they were going to take it to wilderness. Talk about evangelistic,
Yeah, right. That's a big goal back then.
Yeah. Now this is just put this in there just to show you the rocks and the water. This is the middle fork of the Flathead. So it's in the same complex. And it's just hard to even believe it's real. It looks like somebody was out there painting the rocks or something, but that's the middle fork. So there's the North Fork, Middle Fork, South Fork. And this is a good view of the middle fork. It's still within Bob Marshall complex, but it's in the Great Bear Wilderness.
All right.
It's the last one.
Okay, that's the last one. So thank you for doing that. I think it's great for me to see more of a kind of a context of what we're talking about when we're talking about the Bob Marshall Wilderness, because we're talking about, of course, a lot of people, when they think wilderness, think like trees and flat spaces. And this is most certainly not that. And it is watered, and it has trout, and it has elk and bears and wildlife that rival places like Great Glacier, right? I mean, that there's a similarity between those ecosystems. And so let's talk specifically a little bit about your book. How did you choose your heroes? These are some people that you knew, some people you didn't know. How did you go about choosing the heroes of the Bob Marshall?
Well, I was a fisheries biologist in the South Fork and Middle Fork. And so I got to know a lot of the old-time packers, old-time Forest Service employees, and they would talk about their old-time Forest Service folks. It's just such a rich history. And I thought, we got to write this down. And Doris, who you and I profiled in the first one, she was a pioneer from way back, and she said, you really should do something on this person and that person, and it just kind of snowballed from there, and tried to do, I think this has 10 or 12 stories in it, and then there's another one before this, another one after, that kind of thing. So, but there's no shortage of great stories. It really isn't.
No, and they're also this connective tissue, and we had a chance to visit a little bit over some Chinese food before the event tonight, and I mentioned a friend of mine, and John immediately said, "You know that person?" I said, "I certainly do," and then you were able to share a story from the book and kind of that connective tissue with someone who's lives in the Flathead Valley today, who's been a friend of mine for 50 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Who personally isn't in the book, but the story of her family is in the book. So kind of tell that story a little bit, because it's an emotional story.
Gosh, it happens all the time. I'll bet at least once every couple of weeks or months, somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, that was my cousin or my grandfather that was in your book." But in this case, it was a person that we both know, and they were reading my book, and all of a sudden they came to a story. They're reading a story, and all of a sudden they saw their father in the story, and they didn't know that he had done this. And they were a very young person when he died. He was an aviator, and he died, but he died in a plane crash. But there was a George Ostrom. I got part of the story from him, and he said, "Yeah, Kelly's a heck of a pilot," because he rescued these people that crashed on the Spotted Bear airstrip at night, 100 miles back and forth from Missoula or Kalispell or Missoula, and rescued them. And imagine being, this person, this young woman, who's reading a book, and all of a sudden you start reading about your father. Because she was only 3 when he died, so she didn't know her father.
Right.
So this was a story she could use from her father.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's just one example.
Incredible story. Well, I see, Amy, that we already have a whole bunch of amazing questions in the chat. So before I send it off to you, I convinced our dear friend John to do book plates for folks who are interested in getting a book plate. So email info@glacier.org. and John will sign a book plate that you can then put in your book. We're also going to do some giveaways. John was kind enough to provide us with a copy of the book that we'll talk about a little later, his most recent book that he and his daughter did, and we've got a couple of other great giveaways as well. So with that, Amy, I'm going to pass it on to you and some great audience questions.
Sounds great. Welcome everybody to Glacier Book Club. Let's see, just kick it off. Dave Baylor has a great question, and Chuck and Vicky kind of second his question. Dave, do you want to unmute and ask your question at John? I see Dave's camera is off right now, so maybe he walked away for a second.
The Chinese mention of Chinese food that probably sent him.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to unmute? He's back on camera now, and ask your question. I'll go ahead and he can jump in if he wants to. Dave says, "I love the book and all the stories and characters, but was frustrated by not having more larger scale maps. I read through with my Montana Topo map atlas right next to me, but could find few of the specific creeks, rivers, camps, etc." Which is, I think, so interesting, and probably says a lot about your knowledge of the Bob, John. Admittedly, Dave has 2 degrees in geography, so that's his issue, he says, but he still would have loved to participate in the stories of specific packing trips. So are there maps or other resources, John, that you would recommend to folks who want a real detailed look at the Bob?
For that detail, not in this book. I mean, there's a map just inside the first part of the book that shows where everything kind of fits and juxtapositions in where they come from. But no, we don't have individual maps for every area. We just didn't do that. I apologize for that. Now I'm feeling bad.
No.
It's hard. We looked for maps for tonight. It's a hard thing to find, for sure.
Yeah, what you need is if you want to produce a book like he is talking about, is you need someone who's a cartographer to
Right,
do
right,
it.
right.
But sorry about that.
No
I tried
worries.
to,
I think
tried to paint the picture anyway. It might not be. I did the best I could to paint the picture, which will bring to mind some of the areas they're in.
we'll just have to get out there and hike those areas, right? Take Doug along with us since he hasn't been.
Good comment, though.
Okay, Aaron would love to hear the best route to the wall from Holland Lake access.
Okay, from Holland Lake. Well, you're going to go up to Upper Holland Lake, then you're going to go over Pendant Pass, and then down into the South Fork near Big Salmon Lake. And then you would go up the South Fork for 5 miles and cross it, and then you go up White River and the trail to White River Pass. And on the way, there's a little trail that angles up to the top of the Chinese Wall, and it's a long ways. And or you can go in from Benchmark on the east side, and you go up the Sun River basically, and up to the top of the White River, down around, and then up onto the wall there. And there's no quick way into the Chinese Wall. I think either one of those. I know that the one going through Benchmark is 25 miles by trail. So yeah, you can just get a map of the Bob and study it. You can see, but there's no easy way to the wall.
John, how many times have you been to the wall? I'm curious.
I think 7 times.
Wow.
All my kids have been there. My wife's been there. It's hard to turn it off away from it. It's such a gorgeous place. It's kind of everybody's destination point. You know, there's Chinese Wall, there's Big Salmon Lake, there's White River, South Fork. There's certain things that really stand up, but Chinese Wall is probably the best
Sure.
example of an iconic thing that the Bob is known for.
So Chuck and Vicky asked, and actually Clifford jumped in and gave his opinion. But John, what would you say? Is the fishing still good in the Bob? And if so, how are the fisheries managed?
Wow, that's a whole podcast. Fisheries in the Bob are generally excellent. I mean, I did this one little study when I was my biologist in there that I went into the Upper South Fork where Young's and Danaher come together. And I did a study on cutthroat genetics. That picture of there was one of the pictures, and so on. And 12, I think it was 10 of the 12 years we tested genetics on the fish, and they were always pure. There was one, what we think was a drifter down from George Lake. But so genetically, they're doing really well. Talking to Jack Rich, who we profile in my daughter and I's book, he probably knows as much about the cutthroat as anybody anywhere. And he feels that all the fires up there have actually added some nutrients and increased the growth rate a little bit. But one of the quick things I found was after handling 1,500 West Slope cutthroat, handling and releasing them and so on, is that they're as pure as any West Slope cutthroat anywhere, and they're as old as any West Slope. That's how they get big. They get old. I documented fish up to 11 years old. And not only that, I've caught some of those fish. I went into the 12 years in a row, and I put number tags in them. So I caught some of those fish 3 times over that period.
Wow.
And some of them twice and like that. So that was really kind of stunning to be able to handle this beautiful cutthroat trout 3 times in his life. I mean, what are the chances?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Wow. Doug Bonham has an interesting question. He says, as a writer, how do you distinguish fact from fiction in a culture centered on cowboy campfire stories? And he goes on to say that he packed and guided for Art and Edie Wycombe at the Hidden Valley Ranch.
And where's the Hidden Valley Ranch?
It's out of Augusta. He started packing in the 40s, and his camp was on White River, so that we would hunt elk and deer on the backside of Chinese Wall. And he told stories he remembers seeing bands of Blackfeet Indians still living nomadically, still dragging their stuff on travois up and down the front. And his favorite story to tell was how he got in an argument in the Buckhorn bar. And Art is a really big alpha male cowboy, if there ever was one. He got in an argument in the Buckhorn. The other guy pulled a gun on Art, and Art swung and hit him on the side of the head so hard that the guy's eye popped out of his socket. He could still see. Hospital in Great Falls put it back in. But Art will tell you that story, and then he'll look you in the eye and he'd say, "Yep, you pull a gun on me, you better pull the trigger." So he was a piece of the Old West, and I will always value working for him for a couple of years and all his experiences.
Well, the first thing I'll say is, why isn't someone writing a book about this person and getting all that information before it's gone? Before it's gone.
Yeah.
That's the way I looked at the stuff we're doing, especially our last book. We want to get those stories before they were gone. And, looking at that story you just had, I've never read that. Maybe it's somewhere, but he sounds like a terrific subject.
Yeah,
for
sure.
A story or a book.
Yeah, and the fact from fiction thing, I mean, I also guided for a staff writer of Field and Stream magazine. And he would write total BS in the magazine. He struck out my second year, he struck out, did not get anything on the 10-day hunt. We're packing out through the Sun River Game Preserve, and he poached a big bull in the middle of the game preserve, which could have landed me in jail. He wrote it up in Field and Stream as a big old bull he had been stalking for years, and he snuck up on it by taking his shoes off and sneaking up in his socks. Total nonsense, but it's in Field and Stream. So that's where I get the fact and fiction stuff going on.
Well, you have to be true to your purpose of your writing and so on. And I've always portrayed these all my stories as nonfiction, but they might not be completely nonfiction, but as far as I know, they are. And being a scientist, I was really in kind of wanting to write them that way, to write them factually, because that just came natural to me. But you can never. I used to try to research the object of memory and what one person's memory and the other person's memory. So sometimes it can be hard to get the exact truth, but you do the best you can, and most redundancy that you can.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug, for your question and adding some flavor to the conversation. Kathy Wyatt has a great question as well. Was Bob Cooney the first to document the importance of white bark pine nuts in the grizzly diet?
Well, it looks like it. He was going in there in 1941, wasn't it? We were talking about it. And there's a page of his journal in here where he talks about it. Here it is right here. And he says, a page from Bob Cooney's field note, quote, 2 grizzly bear droppings showing importance of white bark pine seeds. And this was, in the 40s, 41, I guess. But he was, we think, the first person to really, I can't find whether or not he is the first person to have hooked in the Clark's Nutcracker too. But I think he was. But anyway, he went through the Bob, 2,000 miles through the Bob in 3 months, and documented scat and all that kind of thing. And
this is before we had any of the blister rust, right? And which created scarcity in the white bark pine. And we've invested, again, thanks to all of you, we've been able to invest with the park in trying to bring back the white bark pine, because it's such a keystone species for the Clark's Nutcracker and on down the line.
Yeah. One thing go ahead. Let's keep going on.
Okay. Tony is asking, John, how often do you go back to the Bob and hike now? And what's your favorite thing about being there?
Well, I'm in the Bob a lot, but usually now more on the edges of the Bob. But I love the solitude. I love like when I retired, like you're going to be retiring, or is that out?
No, yes, you're good.
But the first 8 years of retirement, I did a 30-mile jog into the Great Bear and back to my car in one day. and just trying to, I like to connect that. And I've done 42 miles in one day. It's in another book. I love to move through and fast forward and experience the wilderness like it's coming by my face. Is my favorite thing. But we have certain favorite places we go, like George Lake or somewhere that is good, fishing. Still up until a while ago, still hunted in the Bob. Boy, that's tough. I mean, you got to hunt the outside edges and then get somebody to help you pack it, because it's the closest you can get to an open season in the Bob is about 5 miles, and you got to go up over like Pyramid or one of the passes and then down into it. But I might have forgotten the last part of your question. What? Oh, no, that's about it.
Yeah, I think you covered it. I have one more to ask, and then I might throw it back Doug's way for switch things up a bit. So Mike Reiner, he says that he has hiked and camped at Tranquil Basin, just south of Snow Slip in the northernmost area of the Bob back in 1995. It was incredible and a remote trail. Do you have any stories about Tranquil Basin?
Tranquil. Been going there for 45 years. My Aunt Doris, who we wrote about in our first thing, her husband shot a bear up there, I remember, 60 years ago. But it's a tough lake to get to because it comes down. The way you get there is you have to go up Big River Trail, and then you have to go up the Tranquil Creek Trail. It's actually not the Tranquil Creek Trail, but it's a side trail, goes up and drops down into Tranquil Creek, and then you get down to Tranquil. There's Upper Tranquil and there's Lower Tranquil. And they're terrific fishing. But I have one memory there. You really want to hear it? My son Kevin and I, who's already been on this.
It's rated PG here.
Oh,
just saying.
We hiked in there for the day, and it's a good little hike. And we're hiking from the upper lake to the lower lake, and then all of a sudden we hear a helicopter. I mean, like right over our heads, and flies over our heads and lands ahead of us by the smaller lake. And I won't say who this was because it was someone I knew. I knew the person that was bringing in the helicopter because that person's grandson had broken his leg along the talus along the smaller Tranquil Lake, and he was kind of taking a chance that the Forest Service would allow it. I think they radioed it out, or one of these kids who hiked out, and it came all right. But I mean, so we're walking, in a very difficult to get to place. We're walking along, and we have a helicopter like 20 feet over our head flying, and we're like, what is going on? So that's one of the, and Tranquil is also a great fishery, by the way, but it's hard to get to. You got to study up.
Yeah, amazing.
We entered around Bear Creek area.
Exactly. Yeah, you probably went up. Well, it comes the creek comes out of Tranquil, and you can go up that way. Or if you hike from Bear Creek, you can hike up the Big River Trail and then the Edna Creek Trail to the top, and then
that was it. Edna Creek. It's funny because one of the guys on our trail hurt his ankle on that thing too. So it's tough.
He what?
He hurt his ankle pretty badly because it's so steep.
Well, it's rough. It's rugged country.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy Lucky. And yes, it is true that her husband is Mr. Lucky, just FYI. And when you talked about, I'm so fortunate to have this incredible group of coworkers. Sydney Yarnell is helping us tonight, and she's going to do, I think Sydney's doing drawings tonight, so we'll get to her in a minute. And you have a soulmate sitting right over here in terms of long hikes with my coworker, Andrew Smith, who has been known to have a hike that starts with a 3 or a 4 in his summers as well, which is well above my pay grade and very, very impressive. So I want to delve into a couple of things we kind of briefly touched on earlier. One of which is you're writing about a wilderness, and I think a lot of people, when they think about wilderness, think about this whole idea of untrammeled by man, and there's not going to be anything there. But when you read this book, you are constantly learning about structures and other things in the wilderness. Talk to us about how that makes sense, I guess, and how do you make sense of that?
Well, there isn't any way to make sense of it, really, except that Glacier Park's the same thing. It talks about return as much as possible to a pre-European condition. So it's a good thing they added in as much as possible. but you know, there's dormitories, roads, trails.
Sperry Chalet, Grand Park Chalet.
Yeah. Well, in the, you know, somewhere like the Bob, you have to have administrative access and administrative structures to preserve and protect the environment.
Yep.
Because first of all, you wouldn't, after several years, if you don't maintain the trail, you can't even get in there. So you're not going to build that love for the Bob as much, and people aren't going to be able to go experience it as much. And secondly, if you really think about it, you try to minimize your impact as much as you can, and that's really basically all you can do. Because we can't just, well, I mean, we could, but probably not going to just close down the Bob because we have cabins and trail maintenance. I mean, it is kind of an ironic, you know, it's an irony for sure.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? The Bob Marshall Wilderness is unique in terms of how difficult it is to access. So unlike some other places where a trail crew could come in and do some work and meaningful work and then leave and go back to somewhere outside the wilderness, that's just not possible.
Yeah.
In the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And when you have, you know, some of the you write about in the book, the size of some of these parties made it likely that there could be an issue, whether that's issue with a horse or a mule or an issue with a person. And we have a responsibility, if we're going to let people have that access, right, to be able to mitigate that in some way. So it makes sense to have a appropriate footprint.
Yeah, and think of it, those ones you were talking about, like Joe Murphy, when he ran 50 stock or more and 40 visitors. Think of all the support they gave wilderness. That picture in the Heroes with that eclectic group of people at Joe's, actually for a while he had a permit and he got a cabin, you know, like a cabin in there. When they were riding out, they were all saying things like, we got to preserve this. We can't let them do anything to Big Salmon Lake. And these are people that had never been in the wilderness before.
Right.
They were actors, actresses, parole officers, friends of Bob Marshall. It's a very eclectic group of people. And so it worked really well to have them support the wilderness by accessing it. And you can't really administer a wilderness if you can't get in there and access and all the things that entails.
Well, and your point's a really good one too about advocacy, right? That you know, wilderness doesn't. There's a famous quote: "Wilderness doesn't need protection; it needs protectors." And so to think about, and those need to be diverse voices, right? That it couldn't just be Bob Marshall and John Muir. It needed to be Teddy Roosevelt, right? It needed to be a hunter who had a different kind of voice, and hacking in the Bob gave that voice to you. So what I heard you say is that was an important part of the access, particularly early on, that people were able to go home, whether that was to New York or New Jersey or Arizona or California, and spread the word, right, about the importance and the feeling that they had in the Bob.
And right up to the present day, I mean, the book my daughter and I wrote, we highlighted some packers and conservationists and how they helped preserve the Bob and continue to preserve the Bob. So it's not something that's just, it never ends, as you would know.
That's a great segue. You know, you should take over this gig when I retire.
Well, before we get to that, I want to hear more from you because you haven't really talked.
So I want to talk about, let's talk a little bit about this book. So this is the most recent book, and he got to write this with his daughter, which is super cool. We're going to put a link to where you can purchase this book in the chat, and he's going to give one away, and I'm going to make him sign it to you before he goes. So how cool is that to write a book with your daughter?
Well, first of all, I walked in here and I found out all you guys want to write a book anyways. Everybody's got a book in them, you know. And I might advertise this right here because it's the most success I've ever had advising people to write a book, and that is read Stephen King on writing. Stephen King, you know, horror novelist or whatever, his book on writing is incredible. And I don't know how many people I've recommended to, and at least a couple of them, they told me that was one of the reasons they were able to complete their book. And basically what he says is, every day do something. I've interpolated it a little bit, but every day do some writing on the book. So I also say every day, at least do some research on it and some writing. And that's the way you do it. But what was the question again?
How cool is it to write
Oh, yeah,
a book with your daughter?
Yeah, well, it's pretty neat. It's, I don't know how many of you guys are thinking about writing a book. I mean, probably some of you. And they say everybody's got a book in them, but it's very difficult to get a book published. You got to be very dedicated, and I would just highly recommend on writing. And Heather and I both benefited very much from it. But it was really neat. Heather and I have been visiting all these places. She's 33, and since she was, there's a picture of her on my back at Sheep Creek in the Great Bear Wilderness when she was 6 months old, and so her whole life and my whole life, we've and my sons, my wife, have all been dedicated to going through the wilderness and then to be able to write about it now after all these years, a little more. And she helped me on my previous books too. But she would write a chapter, I'd write a chapter, we'd exchange it, we'd review it. It was just a great interaction. I would recommend it. Some people say, oh, you can't write a book together, but I think anybody out here that does science, you co-author stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really not that much different. But thanks for bringing it up. But yeah, it was very satisfying, and it's a lot of work. Writing a book is a lot of work.
Yeah, these don't happen by accident, I'm told. Yeah. So big Stephen King fan, 11/22/63. If anybody hasn't read that, it's a mind book.
And see, I've never read a Stephen King book. I've just read On Writing, and it's a great
There you
book.
go. There you go.
It's a great book.
Yeah. So I also want to, this won't be a surprise to many of my friends here in our Glacier Book Club, but I love connective tissue, right? And you and I had a discussion, and I emailed my friend Jerry Emery, who wrote, for many of you who will remember that he wrote the seminal George Melendez-Wright biography. And, here we have these two guys. We have George Melendez-Wright, who dies somewhere in the 30s, in his 30s, and you have Bob Marshall, who dies somewhere in the 30s, in his 30s, and then you have Bob Cooney, who's working in the Bob during that period of time, probably when Bob Marshall came walking through his camp. Talk to me a little bit about how that connectivity sits with you as a kind of a historian and writer, and what do you think about in your mind when you think about that? I mean, did Wright and Marshall meet? What kind of, how does that sit with you?
Well, when you told me you wanted to, you were interested in George Melendez-Wright and how that may have hooked into Bob Marshall's experiences, you found this eulogy that Bob Marshall had written about George Melendez-Wright. So there's no doubt he knew him.
Yeah.
What we don't know is we don't know if Bob knew some of the other, like Joe Murphy and that kind of thing, and Bob Cooney. I don't know. He probably didn't. George Bob passed away in 1939, and Bob Cooney was in doing the research in the Bob in 1941.
Okay.
So I don't know if they ever met, but it's very interesting. And to me, they're the scientists, the intellectuals, and people like Joe Murphy or present day long-term outfitters. They're kind of the practical people. And between the two of them, that's how you get that matrix that protects wilderness. That was my thought about it. What about you?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I think about is when I read the Wright book, and similarly about Bob Marshall, but mostly about Wright, it seemed to me that policy about wildlife stopped on a national level when George Melendez-Wright died. So I think about what happened. What would the world look like, John Fraley, if George Melendez-Wright and Bob Marshall lived to be 75 years old?
Well, you think that all the time of these great people that die young. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. And one funny thing about Cooney, by the way, is he was going to go into the military in 1939, or I can't remember exactly right about there. And they shifted him over to doing a study in the east side of Bob Marshall. Why do you think they did that instead of letting him go into the military?
I don't know.
Well, the reason you came back on that pretty quick. Well, the reason was that Bob Marshall had been diminished a little bit in its game populations. and they wanted Cooney to survey it in anticipation of having to utilize it for food if we got in a war. But
Okay.
believe it or not, yeah, that's right in the material. And so part of the reason he didn't go in the army, but he did the study on white bark pine, grizzly bears, and goats and all that, was to ensure that the wildlife populations would stay strong. So he was doing it for that particular reason. Keep going.
Yeah, so that's super fascinating, and I think that as we think about public policy, right, we need people like Marshall and like George Melendez, right? In your view, and you've worked in this field for many, many years, he himself has a separated household. He has degrees from both Montana State and the University of Montana. But who, in your lifetime, who are those people? Who are the people holding that candle and keeping that candle alive when it comes to wilderness and wildlife protection?
Contemporary people, I mean. Well, you look at the status of the specialists around the complex. I'm just going to keep it fairly low. And there's wolf specialists, there's bear and lion specialists, there's grizzly bear specialists, and they're kind of keeping the flame going for keeping those carnivores in good shape. And I was just listening to a talk by, I had her into my classroom actually, Diane Boyd, and I know you're familiar with her, and she was kind of like the embodiment, in my view, of the North American wildlife model, because she had come to the conclusion that, you have to manage these animals for them to survive. You can't just fight every, piece of way of controlling them with, firearms or whatever. You have to allow people to harvest them too, and then they'll accept them more. And then you keep them, like right now, we got 300 wolves that we're harvesting and 1,200 wolves in Montana. And she said, if you would have told me that 20 years ago, I would have laughed your face off, because it's just been an amazing success story.
Right. I mean, when she started, there was one, and it was an immigrant.
It was Kishinini.
Yeah, an illegal immigrant from Canada.
One, and then it came into the pageant pack.
Yeah, and
so it's been incredible success.
Diane was generous enough to come to and participate in Glacier Book Club a year or so ago with her book Woman with Wolves. Incredible.
See, I gave her the advice about the write some every day.
There you go. Well, she took it and has done really, really, really well.
Her book is really it's really a blockbuster. Well, how do you miss?
Right.
So you said, I'm not sure what I want the title to be. I said, just have a title that says "Woman and Wolves" somewhere in it.
You're good. Yeah, and then have be the Jane Goodall of wolves, and you're probably fine.
Yeah, when you get that, but that doesn't hurt anything.
One of the projects that I was tangentially involved in when I worked for Senator Baucus was, I think, what's called the Montana Legacy Project, right? And many people might not be familiar with that, but when you drive down the Sealy Swan, you're basically on Plum Creek property, or were on Plum Creek property on both sides of the road, and much of which was adjacent to and a key access point to the Bob Marshall Wilderness. That whole project happened, and it was a Trust for Public Lands, Nature Conservancy, federally funded project that was, in my view, was a critical victory. Talk to us about that period of time, and I don't know how involved you were with that, but what's your perception of the significance of that to long-term protection of the Bob?
Well, before I forget, I want to mention that Jack Rich, the outfitter, since 1960, has been going into the Bob since 1964, a little kid. He has always been a big proponent of that project, and he has testified and mirrored that project. And so there's been a lot of people that are. I remember when it was first proposed. I think Glenn Marks, who's a friend of ours,
big buddy of mine.
He was a trust for public. He was in the land trust, Montana Land Trust.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is never going to work. They're never going to get that much land by it. But they did. And I think it's been a real key. It's just one of those pieces you slide in there,
And it's about 300,000 acres total. Yeah.
It's great. No, and you can look up the history of it, but a lot of people have pitched in to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of pitching in, I wouldn't be a good executive director if I didn't say how you can do that. One of the projects, and I talked to Clifford this weekend about this. One of the projects that both the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation and the Glacier National Park Conservancy help fund is work by the Montana Conservation Corps, and that's part of our wilderness bucket of funding that we fund every year with the park. And because we fund it, it helps get their park funded, and because they fund it, it helps get our park funded, because we can build a larger group of supervisors and folks willing to work in the forest. So if you're interested in helping out, there's going to be a link in the chat, and you can contribute to our work in that area. And again, I really encourage people to go take a look at the Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation and the incredible work that they're doing, a lot of which really dovetails with the work, and we'd like to do more of that dovetailing going forward. So that's my moment for mission today, and I'm going to ask Sydney if you're ready to provide contest winners. I think we have 3 items tonight, one of which is the book, the most recent book by John and his daughter, one of which is a Bob Marshall Wilderness book, a Bob Marshall book by Bob Marshall from my collection, which I'm gifting. And then I got from Clifford some fabulous Bob Marshall swag stickers. And you really want the bookmark of Bob Marshall, and those will be coming your way. So Sydney, do you have those, or Amy, or who's doing that?
So I actually got to pick the winners tonight.
Okay.
So Tony Porter, who's joining us from Texas, is the winner of John and Heather's book.
Okay.
And Tony's has also read the Stephen King book that you recommended, John. So she's excited to receive your book. And then a great friend of ours, and I know a great reader, Janet Brandt, is going to get the Bob Marshall book. Doug, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Bob Marshall book? And then I'm going to pick a third winner. I didn't know we had a third giveaway.
Yeah, it's very funny because I was scrambling around because I'd put them somewhere, and then I came back in here and left them where I put them. But do you remember the title of the one that I'm giving away?
It's called The People's Forest.
The People's Forest. And it's one that I picked up recently. I'm terrible. When I start reading a book, then I start buying books that are related to that. And so you don't want to see my bedside table. Yeah, so I'm be delighted. And Janet, I'm going to inscribe it to you, and it will be on its way soon.
Okay, my third person in my super scientific way of picking a random number and then counting people on Zoom is Valerie Luster. Will receive, I think you said bookmark and stickers.
Yes, fabulous, and you'll love those.
Okay, and so our winners, I will get in touch with you all. I have your email addresses, so I'll reach out to you, and we'll make sure you get your winning swag.
So great, and thank you, Amy, for that. It would not be a book club without a speed round. Now, I will tell you that John, the first one, John didn't get a speed round because I hadn't invented the speed round yet. And so this is going to be a mix of very, very easy questions. It's one thing or the other. And so being a fishing guy, a biologist guy, I'm going to go, this is a book question about fishing. The River Why by David James Duncan, or A River Runs Through It by Norman McLean.
Oh, River Runs Through It.
It's a classic. And we've had Norman's son also at the Glacier Book Club.
I was at that one.
Yeah, it was a good one.
But you might want to tell people about the McLean Reader, which has a lot of his other writings in it, because he didn't write a whole lot.
He did not.
But that McLean Reader is like 250 pages of pure Norman. So.
And it was an annoyance to him that he did not win the Pulitzer Prize for The River Runs Through It, and even more annoying since they chose not to give an award.
Yeah, he got cheated.
He definitely got cheated. That's for sure. Okay, so being a Flathead guy, I know that you got to Montana as soon as you could. Have lived here for a long time. Breakfast choice: Echo Lake Cafe or Pocket Stone?
I guess Echo Lake Cafe, because I drive by there all the time. It's always packed.
It's always packed. Yes, it's just not even a mile from my house. So next time you're out there, call me. I'll come to you. Yeah. Okay. Classic question here in the speed round: Stegner or Abbey?
Abby.
Abbey. Okay. Very good. Love it.
More entertaining.
Very entertaining. Yeah. And buried illegally, I understand, in the national park in Utah or something like that. Yeah. That's something, it's the buttoned up Stegner would never go for that. Okay. And then last but not least, Pinchot or Muir?
Oh, Pinchot.
Pinchot.
Okay, was a genius.
Pinchot was a genius, but he was a forester.
But he laid out the way that things should be managed. He did. Muir was a touch, hands off.
Yeah.
And Pinchot was much more practical and got a lot done. I mean, I teach that in my class too. But Pinchot was an amazing guy. You used to have boxing matches with Theodore Roosevelt.
Theodore Roosevelt, yeah, yeah.
But he was and I think he became the governor of Pennsylvania.
He did, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I would go because he's more practical, more management oriented. Because I kind of lean towards that.
Managed the Biltmore Gardens. It was one of his first after college gigs, and he was trying to figure that out. Okay, I'm surprised by that answer. It might have to be a whole nother conversation with John Fraley. You never can have too many conversations with John Fraley. So
can I mention one thing real quick?
You bet.
We kind of did a lot of heavy subjects today, and then I've got a whole book full of these little funny stories, and I'll just tease it ahead. You might want to read them because one of them is about lassoing a moose that got tangled up in wire by the Blackbear Garage Station, and the other one, well, there's tons of them, but the other funny one is a rooster named Bob Marshall. And I'll let you read it to figure out what happened.
Love it. Love it.
He tries to go over the Chinese wall. Anyway, there's lots of stories like that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and there's lots of stories in you. The 6 books? The 6 now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to number 7. I don't know that number 1's ever going to come from these. Well, I mean, and I'm gonna, I know that we're on time here, but I am going to take a little moment. This is my last book club. I announced my retirement last October, and it actually is happening. So next Friday will be my last day at the Conservancy, and we are ready, and this group is ready, and I'm ready. And so all that's going to be different is I'm going to be in one of the tiles up here with you guys, and somebody else will be here. So I have to say, in my the Glacier Book Club and the Glacier Conversations, the ability to be in community with you for this period of time and to develop some of the richest friendships I have from the Glacier Book Club has been just really an astonishing gift. This work has been the privilege of a lifetime, and I will never forget you and it. And I just want to thank you all so from the bottom of my heart for your support and love and affection and encouragement, because it's meant a great deal to me. And I couldn't do Glacier Book Club without the authors. And so thank you, John.
And you're going out when you're on your top peak. I think that's what's great.
Yeah,
lots left in you.
I watched Willie Mays play for the New York Mets, and it was just not a good thing to see. So we're gonna do that. And so just for those of you out there, I can only hike on days that end in a Y. So invitations, I hope, are forthcoming. And again, I'm just going to join you as proud donors of the Conservancy and proud supporters of this programming and this work. And between Clifford and Fraley, I'm counting on getting into the Bob Marshall Wilderness in an extra.
It'd be my pleasure, and we can do it as little as 2 miles.
Love it.
Complex.
Love it. So everybody, thanks so much. Thanks for a great 45th Glacier Book Club, and thanks for a great run. And we'll look forward to seeing you on a trail very, very soon. Thanks and good night.